The federal government has approved 5 billion naira each for states and federal capital territory to enable them procure food items and distribution to the poor in their respective states. Borno State Governor Babagana Zulum said this at a presidential villa shortly after the National Economic Council meeting. The development comes in a wake of a hike in price of PMS and other food items owing to the removal of subsidy in the country. Also, like we said earlier, we see that some of the ministers are already getting to work immediately. We saw the minister of the FCT earlier addressing the press and letting everyone know that work has started. Also, Mr. Wale Edun, who's the Minister of Finance, Coordinating Minister of the Economy, arrived the office after he was sworn in as along with the 44 other ministers at the presidential villa earlier today. He has a background in economics, international finance, merchant banking, corporate finance at the national and international levels. We will bring you more of the activities of the newly sworn-in ministers as they settle down in their offices. My guest is an economist and a tax manager with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Abiodun Kayode Ali. Thank you so much. It's good to have you in the studio.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
What a busy day. Honestly, you agree with me. And a lot is expected. Mr. Wale Edun, we have to start on that note. The economy, it's big. There's a lot to be done. Is it on the monetary side? The fiscal side also has. But in your thoughts, what do you think will be the first things, or what do you think should come up very quickly for Mr. Edun on his table as he gets to work?
Okay, so thanks again for inviting me. So I think, first of all, it's a big congratulations to him. Yeah. And it's not just a congratulations. He has a lot of work to do. I'm happy he has actually hit the ground running. Given his qualifications, I think he's the man who is up to the task. Some of the things, like you rightly said, the economy is in a current fragile state. Some of the things he needs to do is to first of all, deal with the issue of revenue and deal with the issue of debt, right? That's quite critical. Our revenues have been quite low, right? Given the fact that we're already at a fiscal deficit, something as huge as 12 trillion for this year, 2023, and our debt stock is rising as of 2022, 46 trillion naira in terms of debt, right? It's little wonder that it's no wonder actually that the current president had to announce the removal of subsidy because it was eating deep into the finances of the country. So for me, I think Mr. Wale Edun, first of all, he needs to get his team, right? He needs to do a quick, I believe before now he would have done a quick analysis of the situation of the country, right? He needs to first of all ensure that with respect to revenue, he needs to be working hand in hand with the revenue generating agencies, the Federal and Land Revenue Service, right? He needs to talk about what are the avenues you can use to generate revenue. Also, he needs to focus on how to ensure the ease of doing business, right? Because that is quite key. Given his reputation, there is a need to attract foreign investments, right? Not just portfolio investments, which is hot money that can easily come in and go out, also direct investment. And looking at his track records, he's worked with international organizations, right? He's someone who can actually stimulate the economy. I learned even with his announcement as a minister, we saw the stock market actually doing well, right? All those positive reactions. So it's a lot of tasks he has on his hand currently. Then the issue of debt, that debt is something that is quite worrisome, right? It's not just at the federal level, even at the very scary, even at the state levels, right? This morning, you know, we understand that states are going to be giving those palliatives that you made mention of.
Yes, 5 billion naira. Yes, 5 billion naira each, and including the federal capital territory, I think.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, how does that come to you? What would be the sharing formula and all of that?
Well, I know most of the 5 billion, they've been given the instruction to actually purchase bags of rice as well as maize, right? These are staple food items that will be consumed by households in a short space of time, right? It's understandable the need for palliatives, right? Just to cushion the effect of the impact of the fuel subsidy removal, and to also allow government to be able to take control of its fiscal position. But then, if you think about it, by the time the households how do they get the rice? That's the question. What is going to be the sharing formula? Like you said, if you think about it, even in a function, right, a party that you go for, there is always the concern of some people not getting the rice, right? So now this is reality, and we've had our antecedents. If you look at the pandemic in 2020, when the palliatives were being distributed, not a lot of people did not get it. I'm sure you know people who are vulnerable, people who are below the poverty line, who did not get it, right? So that issue of the register, the social register, how do you identify it? How do you share it? The Lagos State government has said that they are going to make use of community development associations, mosques, churches, and other religious institutions. But the thing is, would it be sufficient enough to go around? In my own view, I believe when you talk of palliative, we know it's temporary. I believe one should address things that have to do with productivity. Now, if you talk of fertilizers, for instance, if we purchase fertilizers and we give it to farmers, right, they will be able to increase food supply. Also, if you talk about, your last guest was talking about mechanized farming, training the youth to go into agriculture, making it attractive for them. That way, you are increasing food supply. And once there is an increase in supply of food, it can bring down the price. Right. Another area I think would also be relevant, because we're all talking about subsidy on petrol, PMS, which is the product everyone has been using. And what have we been using it for? We've been using it to power our vehicles, and we've also been using it to power our generators, right? So in terms of transport and in terms of electricity, those are two critical sectors that need to be addressed. With respect to power, the infrastructure needs to be there. When you talk about from the aspect of generation to the aspect of transmission and distribution, right? All these areas, infrastructure needs to be something to be focused on, right? Then you also want to attract the private sector. And I believe that these are some of the good things Mr. OLAWALE, I believe, will be bringing on board, because he definitely knows the private sector well. He's done it as a commissioner of finance in Lagos State during the time when the current president was once governor. So I believe it's something he can do again. So these are some of my thoughts on this.
Let's look at this CNG initiative across the board, because I think everyone is trying to look away from fossil fuel, and we are thinking cleaner energy. And I think CNG is the right way to go. But FG is really moving this, and we see independent marketers, everybody coming on board. How do you see this addressing this challenge of fuel price and all of that?
Yeah, the compressed natural gas is actually it's a good alternative. It's cheaper and cleaner, like you said, both cheaper and cleaner. Even in terms of the cost, we hear that it's going to, in terms of getting a cubic meter or a cubic feet of it, it's just like about 30% of diesel in terms of cost, and about 40% of PMS. So it's actually a good thing. But for some reasons, I think we've been kind of slow with respect to the adoption of CNG. There was the auto gas policy that was introduced by the former president in December 2020. And the expectation then was that the government was going to convert 1 million cars being powered by petrol, was going to convert it to CNG, right? But the unfortunate thing is that I think from the last count, it's just about 50,000 vehicles that have been converted. But I understand that they want to extend it for 3 more years. It's actually a good alternative, but the problem now has to do with the willingness to implement it, because a lot of associations, such as the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association, they've come out to complain that they've not really seen traction in terms of the government's willingness to actually convert it. The government said that it's going to be a free conversion, right? Even though we know the cost is going to be around 350,000 naira. Not everybody can afford that amount. The government has said it's going to do it. But then again, how much effort has the government put into it? Because the thing is that the government has actually focused more on rehabilitating refineries, and also more on looking forward to the Dangote refinery coming on stream. With respect to this CNG, I think the government needs to do quite a whole lot to convince to convince the private sector that actually they mean business and they can really go into it. There are a lot of operators that have started training workers, training youths on how to actually go about this conversion. And through this means it will actually lead to a reduction in unemployment, right? I listened to the chairman of Innocent, Mr. Innocent, speaking about this, how he's willing to train youths on it, but government actually needs to show that commitment and lead the way, chart the course, right? What exactly is has government done? Government has actually put in place, I think, a 250 billion naira policy incentive, right, with the CBN. But I understand that a lot of individuals have found it difficult to actually even access these funds. So these are some of the issues that government needs to be transparent and clear on how it wants to go about this policy, because it's one thing to set up a policy, but then there must be clarity, communication. How are we going to go about this thing? What are going to be the stages? What are the modalities for you to access these funds? As long as all this is clear, you've already signaled to the private sector, you've even signaled to the international community that this your policy with respect to gas, it's actually something that you are going into full time. I believe the Minister of State with respect to gas is something that she should actually be focusing on. I think it's a female that was put there as minister. I think it's something that they should drive and take serious, because at this point in time, that's the alternative. Given the high cost of fuel, that's the alternative. So I think government needs to show more seriousness with respect to implementation.
A lot of initiatives on ground, bold steps taken, subsidy removal, unification of the exchange rate, and all of that. But you see what we've seen: inflation for the last month on the high side, above 24%, something around that, and this is worrisome. All of this will be part of what Mr. EDUN will be thinking of at this moment. What do you think about these policies and the impact on inflation?
Like we said at the onset, I mean, the policy was one that was needed, given Nigeria's bleeding finances at that point in time, right? And the good thing about the removal is that it helps the federal government with the opportunity to reallocate its resources, right? So we do agree that it was a good move. We understand some monies have been saved from this policy initiative. Yes, we understand every time you remove subsidy, it simply means that those goods, those services will definitely, prices will definitely go up. That's quite understandable. And that's the reason why we saw that 24% increase in inflation. So for Mr. Wale EDUN, I think it's something he will definitely need to work, because there's the coordinating minister of the economy. You will need to work hand in hand with the CBN governor, right? The monetary authority have the role of ensuring price stability, right? But he has the role to coordinate things, right? He has the role to work. He's coming from the fiscal angle, right? He has the role to work alongside them. The palliatives, right? One thing I think would be very key, and I'm still going to repeat it, is that transportation. I must commend what some governors have done, right? The governor of Lagos State with respect to reduction of most of the fares, most of the transport fares, the mass transit buses, as well as the downfall buses, the small buses. That's very commendable. We need to see more of this. The importation of the electric vehicles, right? Importation of electric vehicles. We need to see more of this coming in, because it's easy to just charge them, right? And I understand they don't collapse as much as
maintenance.
Exactly.
I had one CEO of one of those companies here, and he said the maintenance is almost nothing. You don't need to do any servicing. You don't need to. All you need to just do is get once the engine is running and you charge. You keep moving.
Yes, exactly. And that's where government actually needs to support, right? So we are thinking that most of these savings from the subsidy removal can be channeled into these areas, right? As long as you can solve that problem and you let those who can afford the PMS at the current price, people like me and you, let us go in our cars and let's go and get it at that price.
Are you sure I can afford
it? Definitely you can, right? So I think these are some of because it's all about inclusive. You know, every policy you take is actually for the people, right? So the people should be at the end of your mind, right? So right now, if you are able to do this, you will be able to help a lot of these poor people who, according to the World Bank, about 4 million of them have gone into poverty levels, right, as a result of inflation, right? So as long as you are able to do all this, you'll discover that you are actually moving them out of that poverty levels, right? You're actually bringing them out. So yes, the Minister of Economy, it's a lot that he has to do, but he's going to work alongside the Monetary Authority. Very important, right? Very, very important. With respect to people, yes, there is the clamor for an increase in minimum wage. It's something that should be, it's something that should be discussed. We understand that a lot of states are even finding it difficult to pay what is existing, right? and the debts are huge, which is why even that 5 billion naira palliative, it's just 52% that they are given as a grant. The remaining 48% they have to pay back. And while I was coming to the studio, I heard that even some states are even struggling with paying the West African Examination Council. They are owing as much as 1.6 billion. So it's a lot of financial mess, not just at the federal level but also at the state level, right? So the coordinating minister of economy needs to work with the states, needs to work with the different authorities, agencies, MDAs to ensure that Nigeria is able to make the best use of the situation in terms of resource allocation. The most important thing for me is think of the people in mind, ensure that growth is inclusive. Whatever policy or palliative you are bringing and you are doling out, ensure the people are not left out and ensure that you're able to capture as much people as possible. So he has a lot of things, he has a lot of work to do with respect to working together with other agents in government.
Oh, scary, but let's have an outlook. Even despite all of these challenges, finally, at least FEC has been constituted as according to the Constitution. So at least by Wednesday, I guess they'll have their first meeting and all of that. But what is your outlook moving on?
Okay, so I think what I say, to be honest with you, tough times ahead, right? Let's
times ahead.
I know we just have to call it what it is.
But that's the truth.
Yeah. So they're going to be before we actually see light at the end of the tunnel. Nigeria has to go through these tough times, right? It's just a matter of how the government is able to communicate effectively, right? The government needs to be able to communicate sincerely and effectively. Then again, for the ministers, I think it's quite key that despite the fact that all these policy measures are being taken, they are able to monitor performances, right? You're able to monitor KPIs, right? Very, very important. So as long as, and that's one thing I feel, ministers, yes, they are being congratulated at this point in time, but there's a lot of work on ground for them to do, right? So they need to be able to measure their performances. Like Peter Drucker once said, what's not measured is not done, right? So you need to measure your performances. Do you need to probably go back to the drawing board, go back and change the way things are done and look at the last minute reshuffling of the cabinet? I'm sure it's a last minute thing he had to go back and think about the president, right? So these are some of the things that we need to do. We need to be able to give people a kind of reports concerning what has been achieved so far, right? How things are being managed. I think it will go a long way to help. And one other thing, with respect to that issue of the minimum wage I was talking about, one thing that is quite important is government needs to cut the cost of governance. I think that's one thing everyone would say and everyone would clamor for, right? Even though you can see 45 ministers, that's quite a lot in the history of Nigeria and even in African countries across the world, right? But I think it's quite important government needs to be rational and ensure that for every minister that is being sworn in, right, there must be accountability. Everyone needs to be accountable. We don't want a situation whereby you have maybe the CBN doing the work of one minister. We want everyone needs to be accountable at this point in time. So these are some of
cross purposes. Everybody should just do what needs to be done so that we can achieve what Nigerians want, inclusive growth. That is it. Thank you so much. I know we can go on and on for 2 hours talking about setting an agenda for Mr. Wale EDUN, of course, around the economy. But I must thank you so much for joining us in the studio live today. We appreciate this. A friend of the house there, Mr. Abiodun Kayode Ali. He's an economist and a tax manager. He works with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you so much and do have a great week.
Thank you, Tolu.
All right.